fuck you for mentioning anything negative.
Like, I convinced my sister when I was a kid that I was bionic.
But what does this have to do with improv?
I got up and I just said, up the ass, walked away,
What did your
and let her
first date think of that?
screech the chair back and say something like, "You're pregnant?"
All the fucking critics want to do is fucking fill up their own ego.
Improv, when you're learning at that level, is for pussies.
Do you get accused of being on cocaine a lot?
Welcome to the show. I am that Chris Gore. This is PodCRASH. This is the show where you get to hear me as a guest on a different podcast every week, which allows you an opportunity to discover a different podcast. It also allows me the chance to talk about all kinds of different topics. This week, I am crashing a podcast called Improv for Humans, hosted by Matt Besser. I am recording this at I.O. West on Hollywood Boulevard on a busy Saturday night, which explains all the loud sounds of people at a there's a full bar here at I.O. West, which is why I really like this place. A couple things before we get into this week's crash. I am crashing Improv for Humans, hosted by Matt Besser. Before we get to that, a couple of plugs. I am going to be doing PodCRASH live here at I.O. West at 6366 Hollywood Boulevard. PodCRASH live Saturday, August 18th. At 8 p.m., you can get tickets at ioimprov.com/west. Check that out and listen to the end of the show about how you can win a pair of free tickets to the show. I am joined by a very special guest, Patrick Ian Moore, who does improv comedy here. He's also an instructor at I.O. West. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Chris. It's very nice to be here.
Now, you and I met at, I think it was WonderCon where we met, a very nerdy event.
Yeah, WonderCon. Loved it.
It was so much fun. I met you there, and you invited me to be a part of some of the shows that you guys do here. And I've done now Comic Book Live. I've done Glory Stories. Tell us about what is Glory Stories and what is Comic Book Live?
Glory Stories is a storytelling and improv show where we have a different performer from the adult industry, usually porn or fetish or something like that.
You have a porn star on
and they come and they tell stories from their life, true stories, usually in a monologue or an interview format, as you know. And then we just do improvised scenes and sketches based on the theme of whatever they talk about. We like to say we don't do reenactments, but we do parallels. And Comic Book Live is a different improvised stage adaptation of a comic book or a graphic novel with a celebrity guest.
Yeah, I've having done both those shows. I did the Glory Stories. I'm pretty much, I get to interview the adult film stars, and then you guys do the heavy lifting of the comedy. And then with Comic Book Live, I've done a lot of characters. I've done Batman getting off work is one of the characters, and then I think one of our more successful shows, we put on I think almost the whole show was dedicated to, it was a fake show called Gothamville, The Adventures of Batboy.
Yeah,
was
like the WB?
It was exactly like a bad WB show, like a young, sort of goth Bruce Wayne, my parents are dead, who is wandering around high school with hall monitor Jim Gordon, and then you see all these sort of characters sort of come to light, the sort of teen high school versions of the characters that populate the Batman universe, so to speak.
Yeah, that was amazing. I would like to do more with that. That was really, really fun. It was so easy to take those characters in different directions. It makes me real excited for more Comic Book Live shows we're going to do, because I think that show is the model for how to do that show well.
Yeah, it turned out well because we had sort of a sort of at least an outline of a story, which allowed the people in your team to just really shine, and then
I thought having all your props and costumes really helped quite a bit too.
I brought all the Batman masks, but that was a blast, and then it was a lot of fun to sort of play in that world. You're kind of like, improv is sort of like you're acting and writing at the same time.
And directing, usually, too.
Yeah. So Matt Besser's kind of a master from that world, and
yeah,
and he was instrumental in starting the UCB, but also all of this is connected by a guy who's sort of the godfather of improv, which is Del Close.
I am looking at an oil painting of him right now.
Well, I mean, for those in our audience who don't know a lot about improv comedy, how does Del Close figure into that world? I mean, he created the whole yes and statement.
Yeah, I think he trained, without geeking out too hard, he came out of working with Viola Spolin and Paul Sills, and then formed the committee in the 1960s out of the UC Berkeley, and they started performing what we call the Herald, long-form improv with yes and don't ask questions and never say no. But he went on to form so many schools and training centers and worked on Saturday Night Live and Second City Chicago. I didn't get into it until we had lost him, but from everybody that I've talked to who did work with him, including Matt Besser, I mean, everybody loved him, and he was the most wonderful sensei anybody could wish for.
And you don't just perform here, you also teach classes.
I teach a mime class about once a year, but I also teach improv for English as a second language students and do a show with them here at IO West.
Well, what a perfect thing to have you on the show where we're talking about the podcast Improv for Humans, where first of all, I met Matt Besser. He was a guest on Attack of the Show promoting an indie movie that he did about, it's sort of a parody of all those horrible dance movies you see.
Freak dance.
Yeah, exactly. So I challenged him and I said, look, I can't stand improv. I hate improv, and I do a stand-up bit where I talk about improv is for pussies. So I challenged Matt. Of course, he bit and allowed me to be a guest on his show, which is the third time I've appeared on an Earwolf show, which I feel like maybe I've worn out my welcome on Earwolf. But I asked him, like, hey, I'd like to discuss this on your show, and he graciously accepted my challenge. And so, well, we'll hear, right? I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are.
Sure.
Cool.
And I do think that we kind of grew up in the same era. We want to listen to like other episodes of the show when you talk about just people being inconsiderate, not using their turn signal, or people not logically. There's just certain things that bug me that I feel like would also bug you, like people sitting down to wait to get on a plane where they're going to sit for another 6 hours is not logical to me.
Yes, exactly. Well, and speaking of not being informed, we were just kind of talking about that before you got here, about how I just can't stand when I do an interview and it's obvious that is all they've done is looked up the Wikipedia. And it's like we're just starting from scratch. And it's like, be a good interviewer. Do a little bit of fucking research, man. Because I'm not a celebrity. So if anyone's reading an interview with me, they already know that shit that you're asking me about. There's no reason to read an interview with me unless you're a fan. So they want the next level. Like you don't start off, so when did the UCB begin? You go, UCB began in Chicago and you moved to New York. Just you do your own short history. Don't make me do it, and then ask the next step. You know what I mean? Anyway, but I want to get to why you're here. So I was at Attack of the Show the other day, as were you. And we were on the same show, and you were the guest after I was. And as you were supposed to be going on air, which I found was funny because they were like, Chris, 30 seconds to air. And you're like, as we're passing each other, you're like, I think you said, I'm paraphrasing you, you're like, hey, man, I have this show called PodCRASH where I crash other people's podcast, and I got a real problem with improv. I'm pretty sure you said I hate improv, or I got a big beef with it. You said one of the two things. Yeah. And I want to talk to you about that. So anybody saying that is Pete. He knew how to get my goat or yank my chain, as they say. So I've been and I'm like, sure, man. I'd love to hear what you got to say. So here we are, Chris. What is your beef with improv?
Well, my beef with improv isn't with the kind of improv that you do. I mean, you are a legend master, and I would say a celebrity in that arena because...
In this arena, perhaps, yeah.
In this arena, yeah. Like, people know who you are. You're a celebrity in
improv, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So what you do and the people that are amazing in that, the Paul Scheers of the world, yourself, that is your free-form writing, and you are playing with each other, and you're upping the stakes, you're making it difficult and fun for the other person, and for an audience to observe and watch what you guys do is amazing. There's another kind of improv of the perpetual students of improv that come in, that are working their way up, and to them I say, improv, when you're learning at that level, is for pussies. And my reason for this is, and this just maybe comes from...
I'm not sure what you mean, though. What do you mean learning at that level? You mean beginners?
Beginners. And what I mean is that improv always starts with an agreement, which is the yes and we're going to play together, and it's not dangerous. So
interesting. I think you're a little misinformed, but keep going.
Right. So what I enjoy and have enjoyed doing throughout is I enjoy fucking with people. And by that I mean, for example, one of my favorite things to do is to just be at the grocery store and say, because that sound is primal when we were kids.
We don't like that sound.
We don't like that sound because it says to stop whatever it is you're doing. As a test and for fun in real life, I love to do that. I've even done it with a cop. I was pulled over in Hollywood. I said this as he was about to grab something, and he stopped. I thought, it is bizarre what that sound has the ability to do, to control. So what I'm saying is what I enjoy doing, and I'll give you other examples of this, is I enjoy doing what, I don't think you could call it improv. I guess it's fucking with people. But it's in a way testing out stuff, having fun with material, but doing it with people who have not agreed. I don't know how they're going to react. I don't know if they're going to say yes, and I don't know if they're going to stab me. So, and yes, I could be misinformed, but one of my favorite things to do on a date, this is what I would do on kind of as a way to like test. I feel like, and you coming from the same punk rock DIY thing, you never got, I'm going to guess you're not the kind of guy who got hired at a job, right? You're like, I'm going to just do this thing. I'm going to start this theater. I'm going to just do that. I'm going to make a movie based on, you don't wake up and go to a job and they tell you what to do. You create. Right? And so I really have sort of a filtering system of people that I want to be around creatively, and that includes my relationships. So one of the things I like to do on a first date is be in a crowded restaurant, sitting around, and one of the loudest sounds you can make, silverware smashing on a plate.
Sure. Always
reminds me of Thanksgiving. But one fun thing you can do, smash that silverware on the plate, get up, screech the chair back, and say something like, "You're pregnant?"
Okay.
And walk away. And or you might want to do the same thing. Smash the silverware.
So are you saying do this on a first date or a date? What'd you say?
I'd say a first date.
Really? That's a real test there.
Absolutely. And one time I did this. It got applause in the entire audience. The entire restaurant burst out in applause.
That's interesting. You perceive a restaurant as an audience.
Right,
That's
exactly.
Your audience, huh?
My audience.
The world's your audience?
The world's my audience. But I got up and I just said, "Up the ass!" and just walked away.
What did your first date think of that?
Well, we were together for like 2.5 years after that, so it actually went pretty well. She liked it. But what I have always enjoyed doing is...
Here, let me tell you something I enjoy doing, which is kind of similar to that.
Yes.
Anytime I see a sign that tells you not to do something, I like to pretend I haven't seen the sign and ask if I can do it. Or like, I just had to do a shoot where they didn't allow cameras into the shoot, or they didn't allow cell phones into the shoot because it has a camera on it. And so they took my cell phone, and so I said, "Can I take a camera in there?"
Yes, exactly.
And they said no. And then I said, "Can I take a sketch artist in there who does photorealism?" And the guy just had no sense of humor about it.
Right.
Like, did not get that I was being sarcastic and wanted me to explain to him what photorealism was. And we had this conversation. I was like, God, did this guy not get I'm fucking just fucking with him?
But so you get that little visceral thrill as well. Like, I convinced my sister when I was a kid that I was bionic for an entire summer. She thought that I was bionic, and I guess
your poor mentally handicapped sister. Why'd you do that to her?
I did not. Well, she's not mentally handicapped, but she was a little too young at the time.
Okay, so it's actually a true story. I convinced my sister I was bionic. Now, admittedly, she was like 4 or 5 years old, and I'm 3 years older than her, so I was like 7 or 8. But I just learned what a lot of children learn, the power of lying, which is kind of like acting in a way, lying. You just basically, you just say whatever it is and you believe it. And I convinced her that I was bionic. Have you ever done anything like that as a kid?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think all children are improvising when they do their games and stuff anyway. But I was thinking about the kind of stuff I did when I was watching you earlier tonight talking about the police. Because the one time I got picked up and detained and taken in by the police, I was 12 years old. And I had a backpack full of vampire hunting equipment and had picked the lock to a church to try and get holy water because I didn't know Pentecostal churches don't have holy water. And the Pentecostals, they called the police, they picked me up, and I had a backpack with like sharpened stakes and crucifixes and garlic, everything like that because I was... And it's the one, that's
the thing that like kids have is like kids have the power of imagination, which to me like ties into being a writer, it ties into being an actor. If you can imagine something in front of you, that's something that you need to hold on to. You can't lose that.
Sure.
As you become an adult and become either an actor or a performer, like somewhere in the world of entertainment, you have to at least believe it in your head.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
All right, let's listen to more of Improv for Humans.
And one of my favorite things also is, it's so funny you get the same thrill. I will just act confused.
Mm-hmm.
I act confused and I act dumb. And I'm extremely patient and I'm really polite and nice, but I know that I'm annoying the crap out of people.
But what does this have to do with improv?
Because I feel that...
Because you are improvising and... That's what you're doing.
But I guess I feel that my issue with it is that you can improv with other improv actors, other improv comedians, and it is a safe environment where you're upping the stakes in terms of content, pushing them in corners, changing the story around. That, to me, is fun. Improv in real life is dangerous. Therefore, improv is for pussies. That's my theory.
Whoa.
Now, I'm not saying
you just spoke really quick and didn't make much sense out of that.
Please
okay,
rip me apart.
on.
Rip me apart.
No, I'm not going to rip you apart, but perhaps, I don't know, break it down. Let's break it down for a second.
Yeah.
First off, the yes and thing. You start off by saying improv is all about yes and. That is a very big misunderstanding. Our improv school, our motto is, we have it as a Latin phrase on one of our T-shirts. It was, if this unusual thing is true, then what else is true? That's what we think improv is. If this unusual thing is true, then what else is true? You can take that through any sketch you've ever liked. You can say that phrase before every line, and that'll take you through the scene. Saying it's yes and is kind of...
Well, that's the Del Close thing, right? I mean, like...
Well, it's a misunderstood Del Close thing. It's like Del's is like Jesus, He said a lot of things and had a lot of interpreters that perhaps took what he said too far and made it into things that he didn't really mean. Mm-hmm. Yes and is about agreement. Agreement doesn't necessarily mean you literally say the words yes all the time. In fact, you can say no. In fact, that you more often probably do say no. Agreement means I'm agreeing with the improviser, not that I'm agreeing with the character. You see the difference there? Mm-hmm. So agreement is I'm agreeing to your premise. So I'm going to go with your premise. So if your premise is I can't believe you're pregnant and the reaction you want isn't me to start laughing, because if I'm the date, because that kind of ruins the bit in a way. So the agreement is to act shocked and say, for the woman to go, no, I didn't say I was pregnant. That would be more the agreement, because I agree to play along with you. So people, beginning levels in shitty improv schools will teach that agreement is you say yes and all the way. And what happens is you have scenes that are very silly, and it's like children improvising, not like adults improvising. It's just like everything's okay. And to me, when I see that kind of improv, I think it's crap too. It looks like I said, like children improvising, just like they say something wacky and I got no problem with it. Like scenes that don't make this show, the Improv for Humans show, that I cut are scenes where, someone introduces a premise and the other person, where in real life, a person, if introduced with that same premise, would have a problem with it, but the bad improviser or improviser in a weak moment will say, yes, and just roll with it, and you're like, well, if you're rolling with it, then it'd be like in a Cheech and Chong movie if no one had problems with them smoking pot. It'd be like, no, you want people to have problems with them smoking pot. If it was Dumb and Dumber and people didn't react to the fact that they were dumb, then there's no movie. The movie's over. It's like you have to have straight men, basically. You have to have people react to the unusual thing and call it out as being unusual. And if they don't call it out as being unusual, then we're in a crazy world, and we call that Crazy Town. And now all of a sudden we're in Crazy Town, where everything is crazy, and then I don't see what's funny when we're in Crazy Town. I don't like those scenes. But, and the other thing you said was it always starts out with yes and. This show never starts out with yes and, because we do premise improv. The yes anding is in the story itself, is in just telling a story, and then we start off with a premise. I'm getting way too inside baseball here. But there's something called organic improv, and they're both great, and they're both done in our theater. There's premise improv and there's organic improv. Premise improv starts out with an opening, and from the opening you pull a premise. You hear something funny in the opening, and you take that funny thing and you start a scene with it. So right away you just throw out a funny premise and people roll with it. The yes anding part, where you're literally doing the yes and, is when you do organic. You start with just a word, no opening, just a word, nothing basically. Apple. I just start in an apple orchard and I'm pulling apples. There's nothing funny about that. The next guy comes in and goes, hey, he yes ands that by picking an apple and going, hey, we got to get these apples in before the big storm comes. Nothing funny there. They're both yes anding until they organically fall into something that is funny, and then they stop yes anding and they start doing, if this unusual thing is true, then what else is true? So that's what improv is. What I heard you say, I like to go against, I think you said I like to go against expectations or change the game in the middle. I don't like that as an improviser. If I'm in the middle of a scene and we're on what we call the game, and then someone takes a left turn and takes us somewhere else, I don't consider that dangerous. I just consider that irritating and someone I can't trust on stage. I'm like, well, they obviously thought their idea was better than everybody else's, and now they're being selfish, basically, and they're doing their own thing. It's like, all right, well, go do your own thing. You're not working with us to build something. I don't think that's being a pussy. I almost think that's just, and I don't think he's being whatever the opposite of being a pussy is, being brave. I don't think that's brave. That's just being a steamroller, being selfish. So
I would definitely, as someone who does a podcast where I'm always the guest, I find it shocking you'd call me selfish, but I think that that's accurate. And I guess
it's only selfish if you don't go along with. It's like I heard you on How Did This Get Made, and it'd be like if they were all commenting on a funny thing about the movie, and then all of a sudden you start commenting. You didn't build on that. You just start commenting on something completely different. It'd be like, all right, you're having your observation, but did you not hear that we were on a riff? And that isn't what you did. You did yes and. You did go with whatever because you wanted to. You're like, yeah, that is funny, that thing about Godzilla, and here's my observation about it, building on what you were already saying, and you'd bring in your own knowledge, which was great. So I didn't hear you doing that. Right. So I don't know if you do that, at least from what I've heard so far.
Well, one of the things I guess this just comes from my love of fucking with people, which is I think Film Threat was a lot about that. I mean, a lot of the stuff that we did in that was, I look at it now and it's like, this is like the internet. The attitude, you pointed that out. It's like the internet before the internet. It's like the internet, but on thin slices of wood, really, really thin ones. And that's what zines were. And one of the things, I was never sort of accepted, having done Film Threat. So I always had to crash parties and had to force myself to get good at just talking my way in. And it just, I guess, sort of developed some skills where I could talk my way into any party. I would come up and say, hey, man, my name is Jesse Damon. I have no idea if I'm on the list, but is Matt here? I'm supposed to meet him. If it's cool if I'm not on the list, I talked to Karen. I don't know. I'll just stand over here.
Okay, so we're back at a very loud I.O. West on a Saturday night, and I'm here with my friend Patrick Ian Moore. talking about improv and what we just listened to. Like, yes, I use this. I crash parties and I get into places I should never get into just by acting confused and acting like I know what I'm talking about, and then also being extremely polite. It's something that's really saved me. I never get upset or freak out. I always just like, hey, it's cool, if you just let me. But have you ever used any tricks like that? Have you ever used your power of improv, like in public? Like I like to use. I prefer to do it that way because I feel like there's no one's agreeing with what I'm. That's the whole thing with improv. Is like the sort of you agree to all play in this world. I like to do those kinds of things. I like to mess with people that aren't that don't know me.
Sure.
That must mean I'm weird.
Well, and that's to say that you're improvising from the perspective that no one else knows you're improvising. I can see where you would say that's braver than improvising with people who have agreed to play in that realm with you.
Because I could get punched in the face. I could get my ass kicked.
Yeah, but I think there is less risk of that happening than people just ignoring you or seeming freaked out. Because I think most people want to avoid confrontation, and you have a better chance of getting into a confrontation on stage than on the street. But if you think like that,
but no one's gonna punch me on stage.
Oh no, they're not gonna. But they're probably not gonna punch you in real life either. I mean, you'd really have to make it bad. Now, but I know where you're coming from.
Now we talked about Del Close like in that last segment. There's a giant oil painting of Del Close here, like right up the stairway.
It's from a Matt Dillon movie.
Okay, so tell us about that.
I think it's called Employee of the Week It's not the Dane Cook, Jessica Simpson one. It has Matt Dillon and maybe Pam from The Office. I don't know, but this Del Close had already passed, but this painting is in it as like somebody's father or the president of something.
Well, he is kind of the, at least the godfather of improv.
He is the godfather of long-form improv, for sure.
All right, let's listen to another segment from Improv for Humans.
One of the ways I would always get into a party, the hardest ones to get into, maybe this is more of a tip, but this is something you'd have to be really good at this, because this is, in a way, using improv as a superpower. Like in Team America, when the lead guy, his power of acting was something they needed for their team. But one thing I would do is sort of sidle up to the front of a line of a party with a beer, just a little pint glass with maybe half of an apple juice or some drink in it. I wouldn't make eye contact, poker face all the way, look right at the bouncer and just say, hey man, is it cool if I take this outside? He'd say, dude, you can't take alcohol out of here. Get back in the party. I got into more parties at Sundance using that stupid trick because I would just hide it in my jacket, because it's the only thing I knew that a bouncer could get fired for was taking alcohol outside of a venue.
That's a good trick.
So I feel like I
don't know what that's to do with improv, though.
You're right. I feel like and maybe it's just from seeing a lot of, and you're right, being misinformed. Yes, I have not taken an improv class.
Let me go back to pranks for a while. I mean, that's what my group was kind of known for, too, the sketch show UCB. And one of the things we liked to do was take a character that already existed, a fictional character that existed in one of the sketches, and then take that character out into the real world. And it wasn't like a punked kind of or a candid camera kind of prank. It was more like, let's just take this fiction out into the real world, and the real world is our straight man. So like I was saying earlier... So
you've done that. That's like an exercise in improv, is to go out in the real world then? Because that's exactly what agreement,
back to yes and, the agreement is we wanted them to be upset at whatever we were doing, One time we got Amy to pretend she was blind, and we had supposedly a seeing eye dog, but it wasn't. It was just a regular lab on one of those seeing eye dog tethers, and brought the dog into a hot dog joint, and the dog was eating hot dogs off of people's plates, and then people get mad, and then we'd say, hey, it's just a seeing eye dog. So the yes and was, we wanted them to get mad. If they had laughed and said, yes, you can have the hot dog, that, in fact, would be what we call denial. So it's not literally the words yes and. So fucking with people and them reacting just real, just act real, respond real. That's what yes and in agreement truly is. It's not about literally saying the words yes to everything. That's what bad improv is. But to your point, there's a lot of bad schools out there that teach that, or they don't get it, or the students don't get it, and that is what you see, and that is why it's bad improv, and that's what gives improv a bad name, is when people see that kind of improv. It just looks childish and silly. It doesn't look like something that is good enough to be written up and be a sketch, as we aim for.
Well, that's definitely, I feel like, where my opinion came from then. It's just it's one of those things where I thought, if you want to really get some practice in improv, go out in real life where you have no idea what's going to happen, you know? And there's a story once a buddy of mine told me, who ran this comic shop called Dave's Comics in Detroit, told me this story about how he was in the biker world. He was a biker, and this guy, Hell's Angels guy, pulled a knife on him, and he was shaken, and he thought he was going to die. And he proceeded to tell a story about how he was going to rip that knife out of his hand, and exactly what he was going to do and how he was going to carve his face. That story had such an impression on me. I thought, wow. The other guy had a weapon. He used his words. I thought, I'm not the most built guy. I'm sort of a gangly geek. Maybe I can use these words to protect me in the real world and conquer bullies that way. So I've always admired the stuff that you and what you've done with UCB is just, it's revolutionary. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's amazing. What I've observed is maybe sort of because now this is a thing that so many people are doing it, that I feel that maybe not everyone can do it. It's the same way I feel about indie film, where it's like, we got a camera, we can do anything now. And just because everyone can do it doesn't mean that everybody should do it.
Or like mumblecore in particular, it's like, right, all we have to do is just kind of act and just kind of give a slice of life, and that's cool. It's like, no. You're not all... That's not all it is. You got to bring some meat to the table. Yeah, but
it's too bad that like Mark Duplass and his brother Jeff got like thrown into that group, because they're not that. I mean, they really care about story and conflict. The Puffy Chair is one of my all-time favorites. I love that movie. Mm-hmm. And so there, I guess what I'm saying is, they're different schools, and To your point, I would also
believe
say...
me, most improv is shit. But then again, most stand-up is shit. I mean, let's be honest.
I agree with you.
And most punk rock is shit, you know? I used to say that when I was into punk. I was like... Because the whole aesthetic was, anybody can do it. And it's like, okay, yeah, anybody can do it. That doesn't mean everybody's good. It's like, there's good punk rock fans and there's bad ones. Yeah, anyone can do it, and that's great. And I do think there is value, and so did our guru Del Close. And I do believe everybody could gain something from taking a 101 class of improv, and maybe even a second level. But after that, you got to get serious. Like, if you're going to take a third, fourth, really start doing it for a couple of years, you got to be funny. Yeah. You know, and a lot of people are like, I don't get it after a year, and I don't get it, and maybe this philosophy, and I just want to go, you know what? Maybe you're not funny, because not everybody's a comedian.
Do you think you could get me into UCB? I could sign up for a 101 class?
We're back here at IO West on a Saturday night. It is loud and packed. Wow, the bar is really packed. So yeah, I think that actually I would love to take an improv class, just because I feel like it would just improve my skills in other areas. I've always thought I'm a horrible actor, and I think anyone who's seen me in a bit part in any movies, I played a zombie in Night of the Living Dead, the remake. I was awful. So I know that like my skills could definitely use some improvement, but you can take classes here at IO West. UCB Theater also offers classes. There's a lot of places to get improv classes. Like, in terms of recommending the classes, what are the kinds of things they teach, and then what can you take from that to your daily life?
As soon as I started taking classes here, I felt, and this is how people feel at UCB too, but I felt like my mind was being blown more than anything, it's just fun as hell, but it gets so easy to see connections in everything that you do, and talking to anyone and being anybody while you're being yourself is just so simple, and it's so many things are boiled down into these equations that are so easy to understand. I can't even say enough about it. It changed my life. But it also, more than anything else I've ever done, I got really comfortable being who I was pretty much all the time.
Now, how much do improv classes run generally?
Generally, I think for a program, it's like 7 to 8 weeks for $300 to $325, and there might be anywhere between 5 and 7 levels. You can get internships at both theaters too if you're short on funds, but you don't have to go through an entire program. Even taking one class, it changes so much for so many people, and it's just so much fun. It's crazy.
You know what changes a lot is getting a brand new Xbox, which is pretty much what an improv class costs. I could get an Xbox. I'm kidding. I bet. No, I definitely see the value in it now, having spoken to both you and Matt. So let's actually get back to Improv for Humans and listen to more of the podcast.
Chris, I got to ask you: do you get accused of being on cocaine a lot? You have a very hyper personality.
Oh, I'm ADD, OCD. Yeah, for sure. Oh, definitely. Yeah, I'm.
Did you go through a blow period of your life? I think your head would explode if you were on blow.
No, I tried it. I tried pot. That I just want to fall asleep. And yes, I have tried the various drugs. Not for me. But yeah, no, I've always been high strung. Definitely ADD. One of those guys. I did really well, like in school academically, but then I would be in the office because I would disagree with the teacher or say, well, technically that's not possible. Or once with a friend, we tied 6. This is in 7th grade. Tied 6 candlesticks together with an alarm clock and put it in the drawer of one of our teachers. It looked like a bomb out of a Looney Tunes cartoon, but scared the crap out of her. And that almost got me and that other kid expelled. So I guess there's just maybe there's a chromosome. There's some sort of something idea that's missing where it's like I enjoy messing with people.
We're obviously smart. You got good life experience, which a lot of improvisers don't have either. They just have all they do is they've seen every comedy movie and they think that's life experience.
Yeah.
But
also been married, divorced. I got 2 kids. My kids are
you
grown.
Got perspective on the world. You can talk a mile a minute. My guess would be if you did improv, your big thing would be listening and slowing down, actually. Because you can go, like Robin Williams, for instance, is the same kind of personality. And he's a great improviser as a solo. He's great when he's improvising by himself. But when he improvises with other people, he's not so great. He can hang in there. But what he does is he's so wrapped up and going 100 miles an hour, he doesn't listen to everything and he doesn't see everything going on, and he misses stuff, and all of a sudden he's not working as an ensemble, he's just working as himself. And that's not to say you couldn't do that, but I could see that, especially someone, because you say you do stand-up as well, right? I'm sure that's kind of what you do when you do stand-up. And when I first started doing improv, I had done stand-up before that too, and Sharna Halpern of the Improv Olympics said, you're not going to be able to do this well. You're not going to be able to improvise because you're in your stand-up head. And she was right, and it took me about 2 years to get out of my stand-up head and learn how to be part of an ensemble. So that is one of the skills. You can be hilarious and funny and smart and still have that be a problem when it comes to improvising with a group. But it's something you can get over. But I see that you fucking have a lot of words, man. You got a lot to say, which is good. But you want to take class? I don't know, man. I think you might be better just doing it solo style.
You think maybe is there a 100 class I could take and not a 101, but just start sort of like preschool for improv? But first of all, I just say amazing dressing down and evaluating me.
I'm not dressing you down.
No, but I'm not dressing
evaluating.
Down. Not but as a teacher, you like evaluating skills. That's amazing. That comes also like a power observation where you just look at someone. I feel like sometimes I could convince people I'm psychic, but I know I'm not. But I can look at someone and just go, economic level, this, they're from here, blah, blah, blah. They've been through this. They're sort of it's sort of an assessment of where their rankings are in different areas, where their XP is to, reference video game stuff. So yeah, I love that. It's just rare. I meet, cause I hang out with a lot of kids, the young folks around. And it's rare I get this, kind of adult conversation. I'm
curious if I'd come up to you and said, hey man, I know you're part of the independent movie world. I hate independent movies, and I want to tell you why. I'll talk to you in a week. When you fucking boil a little bit, you'd be like, what's that motherfucker have a problem with independent movies?
I would agree with you, though. I would agree with you in this sense, because you've done indie films, and you've been around that world. You've had friends make indie films.
Sure.
The Duplass brothers, they came from indie film. It's a great place to start where judgment is not as harsh as, say, something where you've got the marketing and you've got creative expertise, where there's no excuse to fail when you make a studio film, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
There's no excuse. You've got the master technicians in every field and the unions behind you. But a great indie movie, you sort of see through the imperfections of cinematography's not great, whatever, but you see this performance, to reference the puffy chair again, like you see the chemistry, with the actors. You see, it helps that he was acting with his brother and girlfriend,
Mm-hmm.
that helps a lot. But you feel something, you see through the flaws. And I feel like a lot of indie films are like birds with broken wings. You want to heal the wing and help it fly away in spite of its flaws, because you know that, like, hey, if you give someone like Mark Duplass some money,
mm-hmm.
you could do something big budget.
I'm not as familiar with those good guys, but here's a movie I just saw, which I thought was the best movie of last year, even though I just saw it. Take Shelter. I think you probably obviously saw that.
I didn't see it.
You haven't seen that?
I haven't seen it. No, I have the screener too. Yeah, I haven't seen it.
Dude, it is so awesome.
I'm watching it today now.
And do you know who Michael Shannon is, the actor?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. He plays General Zod in the upcoming Man of Steel.
Does he?
Yes, he plays General Zod. And he was in a movie called Bug years ago, which was an awful movie, but he's the best part because he's a meth addict.
He's also on Boardwalk Empire.
Yes.
He's one of the FBI guys. He does a great job of that. Anyway, guys, he's the next. I was about to say De Niro, but I think he's better than De Niro. But he's the next major actor, in my opinion. So get on board with that guy. But anyway, I saw the movie, and then right after I watched the movie, if I love a movie, I'm online about it right away, like right after I watch it, to see what people think, to see what people are talking about. It was kind of like Donnie Darko in a way, in the way it fucked with reality. And at the end of it, you're like, what actually happened? That makes you think a lot. And I started reading a couple of mostly good reviews, but some bad reviews of it. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, you motherfucker! Like, the pace could have been picked up. It had a plotting. It's like, fuck you for mentioning anything negative. Like, there's so much original shit going on. This guy's trying so much new stuff and being smart, especially in light of what is at the Cineplex on any given weekend. Are you really going to fucking waste time criticizing it in any way? That just drives me crazy. When independent movies take chances, and I'm also speaking about my movie Freak Dance, to be honest, but when they do something new and all the fucking critics want to do is fucking fill up their own ego by finding stuff that they can say to come off as smart, it's like, fuck you. That was one of the best movies of last year. It was totally underrated, did not get nearly enough press, and all you guys can talk about is how the pace could have been picked up. Give me a break.
Having come from that world of film critics where ego is such a big thing, and that's a dying profession, by the way. It's almost irrelevant in the world of the internet.
We're back here at IO West on Hollywood Boulevard on a very busy Saturday night. And I could tell, Patrick, that when you were just listening to all these clips, I think the thing that improv is for pussies, I think that I could see you bristle on hearing that statement. Obviously, you have an opinion about it. I want to hear what it is.
Well, on most of the things that we talked about, I have to say I agree more with Matt Besser generally than I do with you about improv.
What? Right, okay.
Which makes a certain kind of sense. But I do know where you're coming from, where, like, doing that stuff on the street takes maybe more courage than on the stage. But I always say, like, that once I started doing improv, I try not to think this way, but I think, like, writing is for pussies. Doing rehearsed, scripted material is for pussies. Having a director tell you when to go and using blocking is for pussies. Because in a real improv show that's super exciting and just spontaneous, you don't have any of that. But, of course, I love movies that are written, directed, and blocked. So
well, I mean, just like anything where there's risk involved, I mean, that's not for pussies? I don't know. Look,
Sure.
My whole point is that there's, I guess, maybe just having seen some bad improv, that sort of led to that statement. And it definitely got a rise out of Matt, got a rise out of you. But, look, I'm not... I just feel like what you're doing with improv is you're basically writing live. You're writing and performing, and I feel like you can do that without an audience sometimes.
Oh, of course. Most people, if you talk to a psychologist, most people are more afraid of being embarrassed and looking bad on stage than they are of being accosted by a stranger on the street.
So the act of actually being on stage itself is a courageous act, right?
I think having a bad show is a bigger fear for most people than getting into a fight.
Well, as someone who's had a lot of bad shows,
and a few fights probably,
a couple fights, they didn't last long. I can tell you that. But look, Patrick, I really want to thank you for being on the show, and also thank you for also just inviting me to be a part of Comic Book Live and Glory Stories here at
We love
IO West.
having you.
I mean, it does. Look, I don't want this episode to feel like it's a giant plug for IO West, but you guys have allowed me to perform here, and I appreciate it. Now we'll be doing PodCRASH here. Every month we'll be doing a monthly episode. Where can people find you on the internet?
On Twitter, you can find me at Patricky and More, just everything, no spaces, or go to the Comic Book Live or Glory Stories Twitters or Facebook. I'm at both of those.
I will tweet that out, and I really want to thank Matt Besser.
Matt Besser was amazing. I encourage you to see shows at UCB too. They're brilliant over there.
See, that's what I love about there's really no it's a community that really supports each other. Whether it be IO West or UCB, there's no rivalry.
My girlfriend Liz, she worked on Freak Dance with Matt Besser, and she works on Glory Stories with you, and there's a lot of camaraderie and love between both. The rivalry is probably for people that are doing bad shows.
Right. Well, if the rivalry, if actually having a fake rivalry actually helps promote both, that's a good thing. We could do social media improv where we pretend to hate each other's guts.
Oh, it's worked for wrestling really well. A heel and a face.
All right, we'll look for Patrick Ian Moore on Twitter. You can find Improv for Humans, of course, is one of the great Earwolf podcasts. You can find Matt Besser at mattbesser.com. And you can follow Matt Besser at Matt Besser on Twitter. And Improv for Humans on Facebook. You can follow me at that Chris Gore on Twitter, at PodCRASH Show. There's too many plugs. You know what? Just Google that crap. And the one thing I will say, go to iTunes and please give us a review, because reviewing the show helps other people discover the show. I do have one final thing that I do like to say at the end of every episode. You know what it is, right? Ready?
Yeah.
Here we go. Let's get out of here!
Maui Wowie, man.
Yeah?
But it's got some Labrador in it.
What's Labrador?
It's dog shit.
What?
Yeah, my dog ate my stash, man. I had it on the table and the little motherfucker ate it, man.
Yeah?
So I had to follow him around the little baggie for 3 days before I got it back. Really blew the dog's mind.
You mean we're smoking dog shit, man?
Hey, if you're still listening to this, you're probably a lot like me. You're the kind of person who hangs out at a comedy show in the alley, hoping to meet one of your favorite comic actors, or you're maybe the bar is still open at IO West or whatever that restaurant is that's next door to UCB Theater that charges way too much for drinks. If you're that kind of person, then you're a lot like me, which means I like you, and for that you shall be rewarded. Send a self-addressed stamped envelope to PodCRASH with that Chris Gore, 5042 Wilshire Boulevard, PMB 1500, Los Angeles, California, 90036. I will return your self-addressed stamped envelope with a surprise. And if you say, let's get out of here, and @reply to PodCRASH Show on Twitter, and you live in the LA area, you can win 2 free tickets to the PodCRASH Show, which is Saturday, August 18th, here at IO West. And I will see you at the show. It's going to be a lot of fun. Caleb Bacon is going to be there with the Gentlemen's Club and some very special guests. Some of them, I don't even know about these guests. It's going to be great. But just @reply to PodCRASH Show. Say, let's get out of here. Tell me you want those tickets. You live in LA, and you'll win a pair of free tickets. Okay, Later.
It's good. Look, I go on Attack of the Show every week with TV Tuesday. I know that's going away. It's just there's no need for that with the internet, Rotten Tomatoes, Twitter, opinion. It doesn't matter. So and you're right. There is something about that I have always admired a movie that takes one of my favorite indie movies of all time, Slacker. Richard Linklater, brilliant film. But I would have one for you since you've recommended one to me, which I just did not expect. Something that you probably have not heard of. It's a film called I Am a Sex Addict, directed by a guy named Kaveh Zahidi, who's a performance artist currently based in San Francisco. The movie it's almost difficult to define. It would look like, okay, it's a narrative feature, romantic comedy, indie style. No, it also mixes in elements of experimental film. It's also part documentary because the idea is that this guy was a sex addict who loved getting blowjobs from prostitutes while having girlfriends. So he goes back and revisits all of his ex's relationships, and in the midst of that, he'll step out of the making of the film and go, there's a scene where an actress is actually supposed to, pretend to give a blowjob. And the actress says, I'm not going to do that. And he shows that.